Welcome to my podcast, Today's Dream, Tomorrow's Reality. My name is Vicki Poole, and I'm a master transformational coach and hypnotist specializing in habit change. This podcast is sponsored by the Enlightened Peach, and it's all about embracing our mosaic life. And some of you may ask, what is a mosaic life anyway? Well, it is recognizing that all the pieces of our life, the good, the bad, the indifferent, have all come together to make us who we are. Change any one thing and we are different. With that in mind, I invite you to embrace your perceived imperfections and celebrate who you are. This podcast is unedited and raw, just like life. And I am your host, and I have a special guest today, and I will introduce her in just a moment. But before I would do, I would love for you to do me a solid, and that means leave a comment or a question on this episode. I'm sure Kirsten would love nothing more than to have questions coming at her that she can answer later on. And also remember to like, subscribe, and share. And the reason for this is because I have amazing guests on my podcast. Those that have been following me for a while will know that. And today is no different, an amazing guest. However, the only way that I can allow them to have an even broader reach with their message is with your help. So remember, like, subscribe, and share, and leave a comment or a question. And with that, now let's get started. So this lovely lady right here is Kirsten. I said it correctly, didn't I? Kirsten McNeil. I did, right? No. Yes?
Kirsten.
Okay. Okay. All right. Perfect. And the way we know each other is that she and I both belong to a group called Live Your Yes Life. And they had a podcast palooza for all the different podcasters. And I had my information in there, and then we connected because she has an amazing story that I can't wait to dive into with you guys here today. And so she has beat cancer, and we were going to talk about that a little bit. And then she also has this amazing business, and it is called Worthy Writers. I had to look at my notes because I wouldn't remember. And I am just really intrigued about what all that means too. But go ahead, if you don't mind, for the people who are watching or listening, and go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, and then we'll get right in.
Yeah, thank you so much for that intro. So, like you said, my name is Kirsten with the business Worthy Writers. Basically, I love helping writers publish their stories and feel really passionate about what they're putting out there. I do book editing and confidence coaching. I really like the combination of the two to just help writers just feel good about what they're doing and, forget about all that self-doubt and all the negative thoughts that come in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And so let's just jump in because I know from what I know about you that you have survived cancer. And so how long ago was that?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of hard to like track the timeline because it
I
all feels
know,
like a
time's
blur now.
crazy,
But
isn't
uh,
it?
July 2024, I will be 1 year cancer free.
All right, beautiful.
So I did chemo in, I think, 2022. That sounds about right. I had
Mm-hmm.
to do a little bit of radiation at the beginning of 2023. So it's fairly recent. But
Yeah.
yeah, like I said, it feels like a lifetime ago now.
Yeah, I bet. Probably in more ways than one. So what kind of cancer did you have? Is that okay to ask?
Yeah, I'm total open book about it. I like talking about it. Just helps me process everything. But
Yeah.
I was diagnosed with stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma, so that's a blood cancer.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I don't know much about it. So for those that may not know either, can you kind of tell maybe in common everyday terms what the heck that means?
Yeah, basically my blood decided to poison me. That's kind of the essential way to put it.
Okay.
I wouldn't know how to talk about it beyond that,
Yeah.
honestly.
So is it kind
There's
of like is leukemia is a blood disease too? So is it
Yeah,
similar to that?
I think lymphoma and leukemia are kind of similar strains, similar, family of whatever
Yeah.
diseases
Yeah.
they are. But yeah, there's like Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's, which I guess is even more dangerous.
Okay.
So I was lucky that I got the, more treatable, curable one.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny when I was diagnosed, the doctors would say like, "Oh yeah, you're young, like you'll get through this, blah blah blah." It's just like in the moment, you don't like to have the, or I didn't like to have those kind of supportive situations because like in the moment you're just like, I just want to scream for 5 days and process it that way, right?
Yeah, yeah, I imagine. Um, I've had several people on here that were cancer survivors and are now cancer coaches. And two in particular, off the top of my head, one of them actually, he and I went to the same health coaching school, and he was a stage 4 brain cancer survivor, if I'm remembering correctly. And they became coaches to help people with avoiding and then being able to be healthier going through treatments. And it's amazing how helpful they are for people that, are going through it, because most people get, as soon as they have the C word, and it's this big capital C, it's not like they say you've got a cold, it's because there's such a stigma with it. And so when you first heard that, I'm sure there was so much stress. Like you said, you wanted to scream. It was probably the most, luckily, thank God, I've never been there. I have not had anything like that happen to me. But it just seems like it would just kind of knock the wind out of your sails.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because when I first got diagnosed, obviously I just wanted to like cry and scream all day, and the only symptoms I really had was just like intense exhaustion, and then I had a lump on my neck, which was like my saving grace of like if I didn't have that, I would have just been like, why am I tired all the time? Like this is just like, is this normal kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
And then for the longest time, I couldn't even call it cancer. I was like, this thing on my neck, I'm gonna get it cured, and that's the language I would use. And then eventually I, evolved into calling it a tumor, and then eventually I just called it cancer because like that's what it was. So
yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting kind of the denial phase that I was in, even though I was still like upset and processing, and it was just like all the chaos in my mind, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that it's different for everybody. Everybody has to figure out how to process things. And so it's pretty cool that you had the wherewithal to figure out exactly the best way for you to process everything. Because that's um pretty advanced, really, because most people just crumble, but you were able to decipher. So it's probably, I don't know, were you doing the writer stuff before all this happened?
Yeah, like I feel like the cancer and that journey kind of really set me back a little bit because like I wanted to be this like super like amazing woman that like runs her business and gets really successful while, going through chemo and this and that. And my body was like, no, you're gonna slow down really slow and take care of yourself. Right. So it's just like it was really frustrating to kind of shift into like, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business owner. Like if I don't work, I don't make money, that kind of mindset. And then it was just like trying to like stop essentially and just be a potato and take care of myself. It was a very frustrating thing to do, but it was very necessary to help. And they say that your attitude and the positivity is a big part of healing as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because, like I said, the cancer coaches that I've had on, one of the first things that they work on everybody with is the mindset. And the reason I was asking was because, part of your writing process is the mindset. So that probably had a good deal to do with how you were able to process things.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I I I feel like I have a new outlook on life. It feels really cliche to say, but it's just like I do. Like I could have chosen to like give up completely, to not go to treatments, to, completely fight everyone who was trying to help me, but, I made the other choice, and now I'm healed, now I'm cured, and I'm very fortunate to have come out on the other side, you know, essentially back to normal. But I've actually talked to like a therapist before where she was talking about how you're essentially grieving in a way of like your old self, and like grief
Yeah.
can come up in so many different ways. So like yeah, my journey has definitely been a lot of like the non-linear, ups and downs of, yeah, I got this, or and then, one day you're just like, oh, like I can't do this anymore.
Well, hell, I do that with business sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
Some days I'm on the top of the world, and then there's other days, oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
exactly.
not even anything as serious, but it's still the ups and downs of life and the processing, right? So how long since you've started this writing, this Worthy Writers, and you said you have a group on Facebook, and so when did you start that? Because I know it was before you got the cancer, but what kind of prompted you to start doing that? Were you a writer at that time?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a writer since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I went to college for creative writing, and although I graduated with a sociology degree just because that's how the credits added up, but school wasn't for me. I don't like essays and tests, and like I'm not good. I like learning. I don't like being tested on what I've
Yeah, me
learned, right?
too. Me
So,
too.
um, starting my own business kind of became the natural next step after that because it's like with creative roles, there's not really like you don't really get paid to be a writer of like, a business or something like that. It doesn't really like work that way unless you're like for a magazine or something like that, right? And so I just really wanted to find my own way and create my own business, make my own rules, not have to, answer to anyone kind of thing. And so I did some copywriting for a while, for like small businesses, just kind of helping them with their website and stuff. And then eventually as I grew uh my social media and my Instagram and all that, and I was connecting with more writers, I started doing like proofreading and then just kind of naturally evolved into an editor. And I took like courses online and read books and stuff and kind of like self-taught myself for editing that way. And I find like being a long time reader, ever since I was a kid, that really helps with the editing mind as well. And then eventually I just saw the need to bridge that gap and add my confidence coaching into that as well, is to like have that technical side with editing and then have that mindset where we're now it's kind of like the full package where like this is the process of being a writer and publishing books and feeling good about it. And then Worthy Writers just really embodies the feelings of confidence and empowerment that I want to share with those writers.
Beautiful. So are your different members of your family, are they writers too?
No, everybody's reader, well, except my dad, but everybody's a reader. So that's kind of, my mom's always been really into reading, like one of her favorite authors, Stephen King. So I've always been influenced by that, but I'm kind of the I guess I'm kind of the main creative one in my family with writing and I do like beaded keychains and stuff too.
You do what?
Beaded keychains, like
Oh, very
beading and
cool.
stuff. That's
Yeah.
that actually started when I was going through my cancer and my chemo stuff because I needed something that was creative but also mindless. So,
Hmm.
writing and editing is definitely not a mindless process. So it was nice to have like that added activities that I could still kind of feel like myself.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I was always writing and stuff, especially when I was in middle school, high school ages. And I loved doing the creative writing. I hated English class, though. Absolutely hated it. I didn't like diagram sentences. I didn't like any of that stuff. And if I put the comma in the wrong place, it's like, you know. So I would definitely have to have someone who edits and all that stuff, anything that I did, because I don't even profess to be good at that, but I love to write creatively. And when I was in high school, I even had so many people knew that I loved to do that, that they would hire me to write some of their creative writing papers. And so I made a little extra moolah by writing these papers for people. It was pretty cool. And I'm I share this quite a bit, but it's like I keep sharing it because that's one of the things that's going to make me do it, right? Is I have been asked to write a book, and I'm writing this book, and I use that term loosely right now because I have index cards with ideas on it. I've gotten one chapter written on my in a Word document, and then I've got a poster board that I'm going to be putting timelines and stuff on. Now, I say that because I've been bought that poster board last month, and it's still sitting in the corner, right? So I keep telling people so that I will make sure that I do it. But it's like, and I don't know, maybe there's something that you do that help people, but and if there is, just chime in. But what happens to me is I have all these ideas and everything, but then I can't kind of sort them out in my head. That's why I put things on index cards all the time. It's like, something will come to me and I think, oh, I need to write that down. So I write it down. I got this stack on my dresser of index cards. Now, how they go together, I don't know right this time. But what happens to me a lot of times is I start thinking about the process, or that I need to do this first, or because like I started with just writing the chapter in a Word document, right? And then I thought, well, wait a minute. Maybe I've heard that people, they have like a poster board and they have a timeline so that they don't, like this is a futuristic, I guess in some ways it's a futuristic novel. It's an apocalyptic thing. And so there's a timeline for things that have happened in the world, and I have to adhere to those. So I thought, okay, then I need to get this timeline and I need to put this together. And then I got the poster board, but then I didn't do the timeline because I thought, well, maybe I need to be working on this over here. And it's like one of those scattered things. So I even had an idea the other day, and don't laugh at me, okay? You know how as entrepreneurs, we always talk about we wear many hats, right? So I thought,
Yeah.
I need to find a hat that is my writer's hat so that every time I put it on, I know I'm supposed to be writing. And so I've got one in my closet. I've got two in my closet, and one of them is one of those big wide brimmed hats that you wear in the summertime, And I thought
Yeah.
that might make me feel like a writer. So I haven't gotten it out of the closet yet, but that's kind of my idea. So is that a silly thing, or does that sound like it would be something that would be useful? I
I
mean,
think that's
just give
awesome.
me your
Like,
thoughts.
yeah, I feel like it's if you need the motivation to just like buckle down and focus on that, if that's gonna help you, like, okay, I got my hat on, like literally, like I'm gonna get started. Like that's it. I've talked to a couple writers lately about like brain chemistry and just like tricking your brain essentially into doing the things you want it to do. And like there's so
Hmm.
many little techniques of just like, you know, speaking more kindly to yourself and finding ways that's just going to motivate you to just get started, because I find that that's probably the hardest thing that a lot of writers face, because once you get started you find that momentum, you're in the
Yeah, you
zone
get in
and
the
you
flow,
find that
right?
flow. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah.
just if that's going to help you get started, like go crazy, like put on a southern accent when you got your big hat on
I
and
have one of
make
those already, so.
well yeah, well, there you go. You're meant to wear this hat and
I guess so.
write
I
your
guess
book
so.
and
So I will be pulling it out, and then I said, like, I'll have to, if I have the guts, I'll have to take a picture of me in it and post it out, because it's
yeah.
this big brimmed hat. And I used to have one that was one of the really big brims, but I mean, if it didn't stay up, you couldn't see and everything. I got rid of it. So I have one of those, and then I have one of those that's like a summer straw hat, but it's bigger brim too. But this one, something about this makes me feel like you're at the beach, and you've got your hat on and your glasses and you're all set. And for some reason that feels like it'll do it. So I'll keep you posted. I'll let you know
That sounds great.
how I do. Yeah. So
Yeah.
when you work with someone, so do they share their idea for their book with you so that you can kind of guide them in that, or what's the process that you take them through?
Yeah, I mean, typically for me, like it really depends on like the goal for say like a one-on-one coaching session. It could be like confidence or learning more about publishing or like you said, they have this idea. And so a lot of it is me just kind of asking questions and guiding them to talk out their thoughts more. Cause I find like for a lot of writers, we're in our heads a lot. We're thinking of all of these ideas and things, and then there's nowhere for those thoughts to go. Like we haven't put them down on paper yet. And so coaching just gives you a chance to talk through it and see which ideas feel really good and see what um basically just finding your confidence in that idea and figuring out that next best step to move forward.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I put the things on the index cards, because it's like I almost feel like sometimes I've never been diagnosed with ADD, but it's like I have so many thoughts going through, and I feel like if I don't grab them and put them down on the paper, they just keep swirling around and swirling around. But if I put them on paper, then that one goes down here on the paper, and the rest of them are swirling around. And I decide which one I want to put on paper. And so it's kind of a crazy thing, but I'm that way with business ideas and all of those things. So I have like notebooks with little notes. I have little journals and little poster boards, and then I have like another thing over here. And so all of my things are put in places that I get it out of my head.
Yeah. And that's the most important thing, because if you're constantly thinking about it, thinking about it, thinking about it, it's not pushing any action, right? So at least it's moved into like a next step where, it's
Right.
in a journal, it's on a poster board, it's somewhere where you're not have to constantly think about it, because if you don't keep thinking about it, then you'll forget it, right?
Right, right. Well, even when I go for my walks, I go to walks a lot of times just to clear my head, right? And so many ideas will come to me that now I carry my phone with me all the time. So I can ask her, and I say her because if I say her name, my phone's sitting right over here, she'll answer me. But I ask her to put this idea in a note. And then I keep walking, and then I say, put this on a note. And so when I get home, I can look through the notes, because what I used to do is I would think, oh, that's an amazing idea. That is so good. I'll remember that when I get home. No, not usually. And so I have to all the time talk to my phone when I'm out and doing my walking. So do you have something that you do to kind of get the thought process brewing and stuff like that?
Yeah, for myself, I definitely have to focus on one project at a time. I used to, with all the ideas I have, I used to like, oh yeah, I'm gonna start writing this one, and then tomorrow I'll write this one, and then it's just like, no, that just felt like too much, and I would never get anything done, right? So
Yeah.
definitely the first step for me is just like, what's really exciting me right now? Like, what am I really gonna have the passion for and the focus on to see it all the way through?
Mm-hmm.
And I have like a master list of like all the tasks that I want to do, and then I just kind of look at which ones I'm going to focus on until they're done so that, I
Mm-hmm.
can cross things off the list and have that accomplishment. And yeah, for me, it's just like, you know, when I'm starting out a story idea, usually it's just in bare bones outline, just trying to figure out, what I want to say in the story and, beginning to end, what are kind of the key things. And yeah, it's just kind of the core ideas that come out, and then the specific details can come later. Cause I think it's easier, I know for myself, it's easier to have like those broad ideas first, and then, okay, how do we narrow it down and get into that,
Yeah. So do you
zone where I can
typically
actually.
write fiction or nonfiction?
I've been into a lot of nonfiction lately. I actually just finished helping a friend's mom write a memoir.
Okay.
She escaped Hungary in 1956 and
Oh,
came to
wow.
Canada. So we've been writing that story, and then I'm also gonna, write a book about my health journey as well. And then once that's all out of my head, because it's like we just talked about, where you have these ideas that it's got to get out there at some point, and then I will get more into inspirational fiction. I have this trilogy idea that I've been um playing
Oh,
around with for a while, so
oh, that sounds really cool. Yeah.
yeah.
Like I said, I'm writing this one book that, and it's fiction, but I've always wanted to write a nonfiction too. And I have probably about a notebook with maybe 6 or 7 books that have started, in them, but it was like my interest would be really good and then it would wane away and then I would start something else. And so I figure that at some point I'll come back and read part of it and I'll say, "Oh, that's the one I'm going to finish now." So I just still have them in the closet. I'll pull them out every now and then to kind of entice me a little bit. Nope, still wants to stay in the warmer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I believe that like everything's gonna come out in the time that it's meant to, right? Like if you're not feeling it, like it's kind of that balance of like, you do want to push yourself a little bit sometimes to like have that motivation to write and stuff, but if you're just like dragging your feet, it's okay to just like take a break, do something else, because then that's gonna inspire you later, right?
Yeah. So do you ever think or advise your clients to do, like, I know there's an app that I have that I use it sometimes, but it's like it does a word count for you. So you have a goal of writing 600 words in a day or, something like that. Do you advise people to do that kind of thing? Or is it just sit down and write till you feel like you've said all you can say right now and then pick it up another time?
Yeah, I mean, I found for myself, most of the advice that I give is like a time frame, like so
Mm-hmm.
that you're not like, you know, if you say write 500 words, like who knows how long that's going to take you. Like everyone's going to have different writing speeds and everything like that. But if you say, I'm going to write for 5 minutes every day, that's a set time every day. And you write 100 words, if you write 5 words, it doesn't matter. At least you're still making that progress, right? I really like to get writers to focus on what's going to work for them, because there's so much advice out there. And that's same for like business owners too in general. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like so much advice. Everybody says, this is the be all end all of what
Yeah.
works for them. So
Right.
it's just finding, the strategies that are going to work for you to be consistent and reach those end word counts and complete the book, right?
Yeah. Well, that's really cool because one of the things that I tell my clients, especially if they are someone who's not doing a lot of self-care and they're not, it's like they always say they're so busy and they don't have time for things. I'll tell them, well, take 5 minutes a day to just be by yourself and listen to your breath and just calm down. And even if it's only time you can do it is when you go to the bathroom, just find that time. And so it's pretty cool that it's kind of that same thing, it's find a little small space and then you'll eventually make it a bigger space of what you can do, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that reminds me of like a lot of writers say that, there's I don't have enough time to write and this and that. And it's just like 5 minutes can make a huge difference. And it's just about choosing, I'm prioritizing writing today, write first thing in the morning if that works better for your schedule, right? So it's just like making those choices for yourself. And we always have more control than we think we do.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it is funny because when you think about it, and as I say this, I'm telling me, right, that we will always find time for those things that we really, really want to do, right? And so it's like, there's some kind of holdback there. So that's where all the mindset comes from, right? Because if we're not making the time, we either are writing the wrong book for right now, or where there's something else going on. And it's like, I don't know if you which one of the writer things that you listen to, but one of them, she's a that was on the podcast, she's a romance author. Her name was April Berry. I don't know if you listened to that one,
Mhm.
but she was working really hard on writing a book, and she was actually one of my hypnosis clients. And she was trying to write this book and trying to write this book, but she said when she would sit down and she'd start writing it, this other book kept coming up, but she wanted to finish this book. And I said, well, maybe you need to listen to those characters for a little bit and see what comes up. And then you can always go back to that one. And she said, well, that's true. So she started listening to those characters and she wrote several books before she got to back to that one that she was starting with. And so it was like they kept calling her name, but she was trying to be diligent with working with this. So I guess there, in a lot of ways, it's with the way it is with a lot of things, you have to know when it's time to say, okay, I'm just going to hold on this for now while I entertain this other thing that's really wanting my attention. Right.
Mhm. Yeah, I wonder if sometimes like we don't want to have that like, oh, I gave up, oh, I quit. We don't want to have that
Yeah.
mindset where like, how do we switch
Yeah.
without feeling
Without
like that
feeling like a
guilt of like,
failure.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. 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 I can see that. So when you look back when you were a young child, how old were you the first time you really thought about writing as a writer?
Um, it's funny. I have this weird like memory. I don't even know if it's a memory, if it's just something like my brain created. But like, I was in sixth grade. I was just like in the van, like riding home from school and whatever. And I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna be a writer when I grew up. And at this point, I've loved writing in general, but I think that was the first moment that it actually like solidified. Like, yeah, that's my career choice. Like, it's something that I've always loved. I'm good at it. I always enjoy like when we had assignments in school where write 2 pages of a story. I would always write way beyond that because I just loved and had so many ideas, right? So it's so funny that I have that memory and it's just something that's always been a part of me and I've always been really passionate about it.
Yeah. So do you feel like, did you do that when you were even younger, writing stories and stuff?
Yeah, I mean like I think I was like 7 when like the first time that I really like created like a story. Like I would write like these cat and dog duo stories in second grade um and then like pirates and things like that. And one of my
Wouldn't
favorite
that be
books
cool to
is
be able to look back and see those?
yeah, I wish I said I don't know if I still have some of those stories, but like one of my favorite book series was The Magic Tree House, and I think a lot of my stories that I wrote were inspired by that. And yeah, I wish I could go back and like get my mindset as a kid. I'm just like, what was I thinking when I was like in that moment of writing those stories?
Yeah. Well, I'm a hypnotist. I could help you with that.
That would be interesting.
Wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be fun to kind of check out? Well, one of the reasons I was asking is I have a client that her granddaughter, she's in the, I think she's in the third or fourth grade. And she came home from school and she had this stack of papers. And her mother asked her what that was. And she said, "Oh, it's my first novel." And she had been writing and coloring pictures all day when she was at school, when she was really supposed to be doing something else. But she had been writing this book. And so one of the things that I was telling my client, her grandmother, about, I've got the book, what is it? The emotion thesaurus, so when
Yeah, I've
you're
heard of that.
writing,
Yeah.
and so I was telling her about that. So that's what she got her, was those kinds of books for her birthday, since she wanted to be a writer anyway. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is just amazing to think, because I know I wrote poetry, I wrote all kinds of things, but at that age, would I've ever thought that I was going to write a book? No, you know, and why, I don't know, but it just never occurred to me. But I loved doing all that. I used to sit, and there was a little creek behind her house, and a log had fallen over it. And I would sit on that log with my little spiral bound notebook, and I'd write poetry. Now, I'm sure it is not noteworthy poetry. And I wish I had it now to look back on, because there's no telling what it was, but I just loved it. And I would listen into that water and all of the summer sounds, because, I'm in the South, so there's a lot of loud sounds out and kind of in the woods and around the water. And it was just the thing that just made me feel good. And so even today, if I want to get some inspiration, whether it's writing or drawing, painting, or just business, I have to get outside, because that's where it feels like that all that energy about nature starts coming in and helping me to move forward, I guess would be the right thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that's true for a lot of writers. Like when you're stuck or like, feeling like you don't have any ideas, go for a walk, be in nature and all that kind of stuff. Like it's so powerful to do that and just like relax your mind and then everything just starts flowing, right?
Yeah. So is that what you do? You get in nature as well?
Yeah, I like to, walk the dog and everything and just, get out of the house, being a business owner and everything, I work from home most of the time, right? So it's just nice to have a change of scenery and,
That's
and get out
right.
and just feel like I'm not just cooped up all day, right?
I know, it's so funny if some it's because I work from home as well. And so when I get finished with work and stuff, if something's where I like, if for instance, if my cars were not working, or if my daughter had borrowed my car, something like that, I would really be wanting to go somewhere to just kind of get out. But if my car's just sitting there, I'm usually just satisfied with going out in the yard. It's just something about knowing that it's there, that I can just go get in it. It's like, yeah, but I'm okay. I'll just go out in the backyard and just relax. I have a little chair that I sit in, and a little glider thing, and just, oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So um when you're writing as a almost like you're an instructor in writing, does that change the way you do things once you put on that hat of being a teacher for writing, and you're editing other people's things? Does that change how you do your own stuff?
Um, I think maybe a little bit. I mean, I know like whether I'm reading for fun or even when I am reading for fun, I feel like I still have my editor hat on. It can't turn it off, right?
Yeah, I'm not
But
an editor, but I always notice mistakes. It's like,
yeah, exactly, right? So it's just like there are things where I'll pick up like certain words or character descriptions or things like that where I'm kind of just like building up my knowledge base of like, oh, I never thought to describe it that way or this is a cool character dynamic. So I think it's just the more I consume, the more I learn and the more I think about and I feel like you know, then I also forget a lot of stuff that I, read like a long time ago and then I just kind of relearn it sometimes too, right? So it's really great to be able to work with different writers in different genres too and just kind of see like I don't write fantasy because I just feel like that is such a added level of, you have to create the whole world and the rules
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. But like talking to people who write fantasy is so fascinating because it's just there's different processes there and it's just cool to learn about.
Yeah, I was actually at the farmer's market one day, and you know how they have the stands out, and there was this girl that was selling her book. And I love to support entrepreneurs, right? So I bought her book, and when I got home and I'm looking at it, I mean, it was a fantasy book. I mean, in her artwork, the cover and everything was just amazing. And the book, it's like, how do you have this kind of imagination? Because it was almost like it was a different dialect and a different language in itself. It kind of reminded me like in Star Wars when they would get in certain areas and there would be these different sounds that people made and things. And it just was very different. And she had that kind of stuff throughout the book, and these characters and the strange names and the descriptions of the places that they were. And it was like, oh my gosh, I would love to sit down and talk to this girl and pick her brain about how do you come up with that stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I know when I'm reading fantasy and stuff, there's sometimes names where I just have to make up how it's pronounced. It's like, I
Oh,
don't
I
know how
always
you
do.
wanted me to pronounce it, so I'm just gonna make my own thing.
No, well, just to share, when Harry Potter came out, my daughter was really young and I was reading it to her, right? Well, I just pronounced it how it looked, right? I didn't know till the movie came out that it was Hermione in the
Oh,
book.
yeah.
I don't even remember how I said it, but it was like as soon as they said it, I thought, oh, that makes so much sense. And I
Yeah,
was saying something
exactly.
totally bizarre. So it was, and my daughter didn't even say
Yeah.
anything about it. So I guess it was okay.
I feel like there should be a rule in, like, every fantasy book where you need to have, like, a glossary of, like, this is how you say
Yes.
all the names.
I think so. Maybe even a recording that comes with it.
Yeah,
Go to this site
exactly.
and they will pronounce all these names for you, because
Good
it's
idea.
like all the little dashes and all those things. Sometimes you still can't pick it out, you know?
Yeah,
But yeah,
exactly.
but it's fun. It makes it
Yeah,
so
for
much
sure.
fun. So what do you feel is like the most fun, entertaining book that you've ever read?
That's a good question, and usually I don't have an answer to this, but lately I've just been saying The Magic Strings of Frankie Presto by Mitch Albom has been one of my favorite books of all time.
See, I
It's what
haven't
really
read that one. I've
inspired.
read his other stuff, but I haven't read that one. It's
Oh, you haven't
called
read that?
what?
Yeah. The Magic Strings of Frankie Presto. So
Okay.
it's music related, and I love his work because whenever I read it, I feel like I'm reading about a real life person. Like I don't know how he does it, but it just feels so like autobiographical, but it's like fiction still, and it's just
Yeah.
like so incredible to me. And like so that book is what really inspired me to write more of like the inspirational side because when I was like teenager, I read a lot of like mystery and thriller, like James Patterson and things like that. And I was like, yeah, so I read this genre, so I'll write it too. But then
Hmm.
just trying to write thrillers, just like I cannot wrap my head around all these things and stuff. So being able to write more things that are just like contemporary and fiction and inspire people and just make them feel good about their life and helping them find their purpose, like that's when I read that book, I was just like, yes, this is the kind of style that I need to be writing. So I really love that one.
Oh yeah. So when are we going to find it? When are you writing it?
Maybe in the next few years. I want to get those memoirs
Oh
out
yeah,
first,
you've got those
and I'll
two
be
you're working on,
yeah. But
right?
but it's funny because I feel like the memoirs are gonna be so easy to write because like it's my personal account of everything, right? So it's just gonna
Yeah.
like come out of me and flow, right? Whereas opposed to the fiction, it might be like might have a few plot holes before it really gets to the final version. But yeah, once I have those out, I'll definitely be focusing on that trilogy. And honestly, I've had this thought lately where like if I can get all that complete, like I'll feel successful. Like if I never write another book, if I have those, that trilogy out and those memoirs, like I'll be like, yeah, that's my legacy basically.
Ah, beautiful, beautiful. Well, when you get those out, the thoughts and the magic is still going to be running around in your head, and it has to come out. It'll drive you
Yeah.
crazy if you keep it in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I
Well,
think
yeah,
it,
I'm excited to see what'll happen.
yeah, because I know if we're as creatives, it's like you have to speak it out, you have to write it out, you have to tell somebody, you have to do something, because otherwise it's just kind of, you might have headaches, you might have aches and pains, you might have all kinds of things that just means your body's trying to get all that stuff out.
Yeah,
Do you find
exactly.
that as well?
Yeah, I know, like, I had to, like I said, I had to write out, like, my plans for, like, the trilogy. It's gonna be like a transformational thing, so, like, my titles are gonna include, like, caterpillar, chrysalis, butterfly, that kind of thing, and
Okay.
just kind of to show, that transformation with my main character. So I had to write out, like, all the ideas because like I said, I didn't wanna forget anything, and if I kept saying it in my mind, it wasn't gonna go anywhere. So, yeah, I made sure to write out a little outline, and then if I come up with, like, other ideas, I make sure to note those down as well. But, yeah, and because this has been in my mind for so long, I know that this is what I'm meant to write because, if I it stuck with me. Like, I've had
Yeah.
tons of ideas over the years, and nothing has really stood out as much as this one. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, I can't wait to read it. So, when I publish this, which it won't be right away. I mean, it'll feel right away to our listeners and all because they don't know when we do this. But when I publish it, I'll have in the description, I'll have all the links and everything. But as all of these things are produced, as soon as you get a link to a book, all you have to do is reach out to me and I can add it into the description. So just think about it. When I get this written up and we get it produced, I want you just to imagine the extra stuff that's going to be at the bottom with all the links, right, of the different
Yeah.
books that you write and how to get them and all that stuff. That just sounds exciting to think about, doesn't it?
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's one of those mindset things we love to do. And
Mhm.
and you've probably heard this story before, and our listeners may have too. However, it's one of my favorite things, because we're talking about when you get an idea, you have to write it down, you have to speak it out, you have to take an action, right? And because there's the story about, and like I said, you've probably heard this about Michael Jackson in his hotel room and he calls his manager and his manager picks up the phone and he says, okay, he says, I just had this really crazy idea about this album that I want to produce and I want to do this video and I want to do all these things. And he says, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Could it not have waited? He said, no, Prince is right down the hall. And if I didn't speak it out and hand it to you and start taking action, he'd get the idea and he'd have it. And so I feel like a lot of times that's kind of what propels me a lot of times because I think if all these ideas are out there wandering around and they're looking for the right host, I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it it's kind of funny when, like, we like forget something and it's just like, oh, it was right on the tip of my tongue and then it just like disappears, right? But I think the right ideas will come back to you and it'll like
yeah.
come back and be like, yeah, like this is a good one, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, if it's meant for us, right? It'll definitely,
Mm,
it'll definitely be there. Probably right in our back door, talking to us all the time. You said you wanted to write
yeah.
this and now you need to write it. And so it's one of those things. You
Yeah.
can't get away from it if it's meant for you.
Yeah, but I think sometimes writers kind of hold themselves back from writing something that they're really passionate about because it's like these days, like, how do you create something 100% like original and unique and stuff like that, right? So it's just kind of shifting that mindset to being like, it is going to be original and unique because it's from your perspective. It's,
Right.
hasn't been said that way before, right? So that's a lot what I talk to a lot of writers about too, is just that mindset of like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel to share
Mm-hmm.
your story. It's still going to be something that's from you and from your imagination, right?
Yeah, because I really think you can read almost any book and you can see little slices and pieces of thoughts that somebody else has had before, because there really are no new thoughts out there. It's just the way you package it up and details about it and putting your personality in it. Like you said, it's from your perspective and your idea. Because like there's studies where there can be five people see a scene, an accident happen or something, and each one of them saw the exact same thing, but each one of them will have a different perspective from where they were standing, what their beliefs are. And so none of them will be the same. If they are, they're
Yeah.
usually it's some they got together and they decided what the story was because everybody has
Hmm.
such a different view. And I think sometimes we forget that.
Yeah. And I really love this Instagram reel I saw a while back. I can't remember the creator, but they basically said, no one has ever read a book, loved it, and then decided, I never want to read anything like that ever again. We're always going to want to consume the things that we love, right? So even if
Yeah.
there's similar elements to the books that we read, like we love it for a reason, right?
Yeah, well, I love that idea. I'll have to adopt that too because that's beautiful. Because people that are coaches, that it's not even about writing, but people that are coaches, they, say, "Well, why should I do this? Because somebody over there is doing a similar thing. Why would they want it from me?" But like you said, and everybody's just a little bit different enough that you write a story that's similar to what Sarah Joe wrote, and they may like Sarah Joe better because it resonates with them, or they might like you better. It just depends on the person. That's why there's so many out there to read, right?
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with one of my friends once where we're talking about like it's so fascinating how not everyone thinks the same way as me. Like not everyone comprehends the same thing as me. Like they're like you said, everyone has their own thing that they're gonna bring to whatever they do, right? It's just like that's just how it is. And even though it feels like there's similar themes that pop up, that's just because that's what people like. That's what people like talking about, and that's what's popular, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it. And the thing is, like, well, for me, sometimes I will be listening to something that, a podcast, or listening to a YouTube or anything, and it'll suddenly, something that they say that I know I've heard a million times, suddenly it means something different to me, and it will give me some kind of inspiration. And I swear, reading books, a lot of times I'll read the book and I've read it before, but I'll swear it's like almost like somebody opened that book up before I read it and added words, because
Hmm.
it's like I did not even see that the last time. So it's amazing, just even, I think it's that we change. And when we read it before, we were a different person. And so we didn't see certain things, or they didn't mean the same thing to us. And as we grow and become somebody, then we read the same words and they mean something totally different. So that's one of the things I love about books. I have so many books, and as soon as somebody tells me about a book, like I'll be going and looking up that book when we get off here. It's like I just feel compelled to get it, and then I'll look at it to see if it really resonates with me, and then I have to buy it. Amazon knows my number. As soon as I pop in there, I'm surprised it doesn't say, "I think I heard you talking about this book. Here it is." You know,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I'm all the time doing that, to the extent that somebody mentioned a book one day not too long ago. And I thought, that sounds so familiar, but I'm going to order it. And before I ordered it, I thought, wait a minute, let me go look on my shelf. And, it took me a while, but I looked on my shelf and I had two already, because I had done that more than once. Right. So now it's when
Yeah.
somebody says something to me and it's a book and I think that sounds familiar, I'll look to make sure that I don't already have it, on my shelf. Might
Mhm.
not have read it, but I got it. But it's like, I know that when you mentioned, I have not read it, but like I said, I've read some of his others, so I'm excited to dive into that book and just see what you're talking about. And what I'm going to write it
Yeah.
down. What did you say the name of it was?
The Magic Strings of Frankie Presto.
Chick Strings. All right. So I'll be visiting Amazon as soon as we finish here today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny when you were talking about how, like, we change and grow as, like, one thing can affect us differently comparatively to where we are in our lives, and that just made me think of, like, when I was going through my cancer treatments, it seemed like every show I watched, every movie I watched, there was someone with cancer or some kind of cancer. Even lymphoma came up a couple times. There's just like, it's so interesting how these things come to our awareness and
Oh
our brain
yeah.
are just like, you're going through this. So now I'm going to pick out everything in your life that is connected to that too. It's just so interesting how our brains like to mess with us sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. And I was I have a Facebook group on listen, I was going to say a Facebook group on Facebook. No, that just makes no sense, right? I have a a private group on Facebook, and it's called Make Lasting Change, and it's about mindset and everything. And one of the things, I was talking to them about just recently, as you mentioned, that is that what we focus on, we see. That's just
Hmm.
the way it is. So we had the month of April was our magic month, and so all month, all the journal prompts and affirmations and everything that we talked about for the whole month was all about the magic in our lives and whether we see it. And so I said, it's like, when I own a Prius, And before I bought that car, I never saw them anywhere. Never. I drove a Jeep Grand Cherokee with a Hemi. And so I saw those, right? But I never saw a Prius. Well, after I bought the Prius, I would see them everywhere. And it was like they would all be the same color as mine, too. And I thought, I know they made other colors. And then one time I went to the grocery store, and when I came out, I saw my car, but the whole row seemed like it was all Priuses. And I told him, I said, it was the same way before, but the only thing I noticed was the Jeeps. I didn't notice the Priuses. And so it's like whatever we have going on in our lives or what we want to have going on in our lives, and we focus on that, we will see evidence of it everywhere. And it's mind blowing when you think about it that it's just there all the time. We just don't see it. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, like I mentioned before, like I really enjoy learning. So when I learn about all this kind of stuff, like law of attraction and things like that, it's just like it's almost frustrating because I can't wrap my head around like the full concept. Like, how is this even possible? Like there's
Yeah.
just like something about it that's like, but I some things it's just like you have to just let it be and let happen, right?
Yeah, yeah, because I think the way I've heard it, and I could be off on the numbers, so whoever's watching or listening, don't hold me to it. But I think we receive 50 billion bits of information per second, and we can only notice without being crazy up to 2000. I think it is 2000. And so when you think about it, that's a whole bunch of stuff that's out there that we can't see because we have to put our focus here. And so it depends on what we've been focusing on our whole lives or what people have told us. And, that's one of the things, like I asked you if you had writers in your family, because I think that it's fascinating that, you'll see a family that, like, let's look at some of the people that are musicians or they're actors, and all their children will be doing it. Their parents did
Mhm.
it. And like I have a client she's a nurse, and everybody in her family has been a nurse. And I come from a hairstylist family. I've been a hairstylist. My mother, my sisters, my brother, my aunts, my uncles, all of them were hairstylists. And it's just like we become, all these things depending on what we've been focused on and learning and all that.
Mhm. That makes you think of like the whole nature versus nurture thing of like which could be like a whole other podcast, right? Of
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
the environment that we are in. Is this just like our innate, DNA? Is this because we've been exposed to it? It's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah, fascinating stuff. Well, what I want, we're getting close to time, so I want to ask you: is there something that you want to share with our viewers, our listeners, to let them know a little bit about what you can do for them, so that if they need this kind of help, they'll know, yes, Kirsten is the perfect person for me to talk to.
Yeah. So, my branding is all about confidence, empowerment, just living a life how you want and creating the lifestyle that you want. When we are writers, we are not just writers. There's so many other things. I work with a lot of people that are, parents, have part-time jobs, have full-time job, things like that. So there's so many things that create who we are. And where I come in is helping you figure out how you want to build writing into your life, how you want that writing life to look like, if you want to do it part time, full time, whatever. We have so much control over who we are and what we do more than we even realize. And just being able to talk through that with a coach and, have someone ask questions that don't really come up in normal conversation and just be
Mm-hmm.
able to offer a little bit of advice sometimes of, this is my personal experience. How does that feel to you? And just being able to have that one-on-one support because I really like the one-on-one because that's just energetically, that's just what I can handle. Being an
Yeah.
introvert too, like group settings is a little bit more challenging. But just having that specialized support and like this is your journey, this is your specific path, and these are the goals you want to do. Just having that someone who can say, like, okay, what are we going to do for that next step to get you to your goals is just really important to me to have that encouragement and be that cheerleader for people that they want to write a book, they're struggling, they have all those self-doubts and everything, And then I come in and, here's why you love writing. Here's your purpose. We explore things like that to really dive deep into why am I doing this in the first place? And then when you
Right.
know that, you can really uncover, like, okay, here's what I want. How do I get there? What's the next step? So I think really just breaking it down into those, sometimes it's obvious when you talk to a coach, like it becomes obvious and it's like, oh, why didn't I think of it that way before? Right. So it's
Yeah.
just nice to have that sounding board, and being able to work with a coach just helps you have that one-to-one support, and you'll be able to publish and feel really good about what you've done, and you don't have to feel like you're alone on the journey.
Ah, beautifully said, beautifully said. And I like to always remind people that, I mean, there's not a professional person that has done really, really well in life that doesn't have a coach. Even
Hmm.
coaches have coaches. I have a coach. I don't know if you have a coach, but I would assume you do. And the reason is, and you kind of touched on some of it, is because it's almost like you're walking this path, but then the coach has the ability to see you from above and say, oh, if they keep going to the left here, they're going to hit this obstacle and it's going to derail them and they're not going to be able to complete their book. But if they'll just pivot this way and go this way, then it will just be perfect and it'll all line up and then the right things will come to them. And I think what a coach does, like you said so well, is that it helps you to see where you need to make changes or where you need to focus to be able to get to where you really said you wanted to go in the beginning, right?
Hmm.
And it's very empowering to have a coach to help you, because I know for me, my coach, there have been so many times that, like you said, sometimes you'll tell them something and it's like, why didn't I think of that? And and it's like a constant thing, or they'll even tell me something out there. I've heard that before. Why did I not do it? But it just obviously wasn't the right thing. But the coaches help keep you honest with what you say you're going to do. And, they don't beat you over the head or anything like that to make you do it, because you really have to want to do it. But a coach is like so powerful to get you to your goal faster. I mean, you could probably do it on your own, but we're talking years and years and years of trying
Yeah.
to figure things out on your own. Hell, I did I created a journal, a mindful journal, right? And I created on Canva. I did really good getting it created and everything. But when it came time to get it on Amazon, oh my gosh, I ended up having to get a coach to help me to transfer it from one to the other. And it was a very, very simple thing that I had to change on each one of the pages, but I didn't know.
Mm.
And we don't know what we don't know. So without that coach, it would not be there. But now it's there on Amazon so that anybody can buy it. But it was like the task, it was making my brain, I think there was probably smoke coming out of my ears when I was trying to figure this out. And when she looked at it and I shared my screen, we looked at it and everything, she said, oh, this is all we do. Voila, and it was like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, the amount of time it saved me. So I'm just telling everybody this story. So if they're wanting to write a book, if they've got it in their heart and they want to write a book, they definitely need to reach out to you, because as a coach, you will simplify it and make it so less stressful. To even the process of writing and then actually getting it published would be so much easier.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So did I describe that well enough?
Yeah, and one thing I just want to say too is one thing that I really loved about the coach training that I did to become a coach. My instructor said all it takes is 2 millimeter shifts, and that's always stuck with me. It just those small changes
Yeah.
can make a huge difference.
Yes. And so what I like to say, a 1% change every day makes exponential growth. And
Yeah.
the cool thing about it is imperceptible in the moment. And so that's why I always advise people, and I know I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I always advise people to have a journal that they're writing down what they're going through, because the changes you make today, tomorrow, that's your new normal. The changes you make
Yep.
that day, the next day, that's your new normal. So by the time you get 6 months out, you feel like you've been that way all the time. and you don't recognize all the amazing growth that you've had. And so it is so great to look back and say, oh my gosh. And here I was feeling I was the stagnant same person that I was 6 months ago, but look at all the things that I've done. And so I think everybody could be served very well with keeping some kind of notebook. If you don't want to say it's a journal, just say you're writing down your thoughts for the day. You know, some people have this
Mhm.
aversion to journaling. I don't know what it is, but that to me, that's just a powerful thing to be able to look back and see, you know, your thought process, you know, 6 months, a year ago, even 5 years ago, and just see, poof, wow, I need to have
Yeah.
some kind of celebration, right?
Exactly, yeah. It's very important to celebrate every milestone you've hit,
That's right.
and
That's
even the
right.
random moments, right?
Yeah,
Everything.
yeah. I think so too. We need to have some confetti coming off on the screen
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Well, Kirsten, it has been such a pleasure to have you, and it's been very eye-opening. So many things that you said, plus me getting, I'm going to have to get that book, but some of the things, it's like you might have said some of the things that I've heard, but it's always the thing is that when you're ready to hear it, you hear it. And
Mhm.
so it's really, really powerful. And so I would suggest even people that listen to this the first time, wait a bit and go back and listen to it again, and there'll be some other little epiphany that will come to you that is so powerful. Like I said, when I read a book a second, third, fourth time, it has new words in there that I didn't even know. So she's dropped some gold here, and you definitely need to pay attention and make sure that you take advantage of all the stuff that she has shared. And like I said earlier, make sure that if you have some questions for Kirsten, just drop them in the comments, because when you do that, you know, she's notified and I'm notified, and she can go in and she can answer the questions and help you. And then you may decide that you're at a place that you want to hire her to help you become a writer, to be an actually published writer, because we're all writers in some ways, but are we a published writer? Maybe not. And so if that's your goal, Kirsten will be able to help you that. So just make sure you put something in the comments, a question, a thank you, or anything, because she's poured her heart out here. And so I'm so grateful that I had this time to spend with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you. Wonderful. So I'm going to leave everybody with my quote that I always leave. And it is: the best way to predict the future is create it. So what are you creating? And with that, I will say, mwah.